Welcome to the Mindful Healers podcast with
Dr. Jessie Mahoney
and Dr. Ni-Cheng Liang.
We are here to help you learn to pause and be present, awaken your breath, and harness the ripple effects of mindfulness for radiant health.
We get you. We know you. We are you.
We have both been successful on the surface, yet struggling underneath. We have both had cluttered brains, been overwhelmed, and exhausted.
We're healers who have found solutions and want to share them with you.
Join us here to discover a better way.
Welcome to the Mindful Healers podcast. Today's episode is going to be about how mindfulness can lead to a plant-based diet and a new fulfilling career. A reminder that nothing in this episode should be construed as medical advice. Today's special guest is Dr. Rock, who is an old wellness colleague of mine from the Permanente Medical Group. And he is currently the co-host of the Health Feast podcast. And he is working now as a lifestyle medicine physician at a telemedicine startup. Our intention today is to share that mindfulness has many practical applications. We hope you'll discover that mindfulness can be very uncomfortable at first, and being okay with the discomfort is the practice. We also hope you'll discover that you're in control of much more than you think you are when it comes to your health. Takeaways of this episode are that mindfulness is the instrument you can use to help you make empowered choices and decisions that lead to healthy outcomes, if that is what is of value to you. So welcome, Dr. Rock, to the podcast. It's so nice to reconnect with you.
Oh, it's a privilege, an honor. Thank you, Jessie. And this is wonderful. Thank you.
So this podcast came about actually because of Dr. Rock's LinkedIn post, in which I don't even know how, you get notifications that someone tagged you. And
right.
You had tagged me somehow about being one of the right people who came into your life at the right time. And I thought it would be sort of fun to talk about how I came into your life at the right time and what happened in that pivot point that led to where you are now.
Yeah. Great. Wonderful way to start, because it allows me to pay my gratitude to you, which I have done to you in the past, but I love that I can express that to all your listeners. This was, I think, 2015. Yes.
Probably around then.
It was 2015. And I was working in the hospital. I was a hospitalist. I was like 4 years into my career. And young father, my wife and I were, I think, expecting our third. We had 2 young kids. We had our youngest son was like a year old. And then our daughter was older. She was 3.
You had your hands full.
Hands full. That's right.
And your wife is also a physician, right?
And my wife is also a physician. She's a nephrologist. And she was working
just to add in more full hands.
And she was working full time. And we were getting help from her parents. And we also had a nanny who would come during the day. And so lots of, moving pieces. And, working in the hospital is, I'd say, a very hard job. It's a very rewarding job. It's a very hard job. Like, in the way that you are constantly in situations where people are very scared and on edge, and you don't know them. Like, you didn't have the relationship of having met them before, or you're learning about them in the midst of this very kind of panic, stressful situation. And so in the midst of all that, I would come home and I would just like unload, Jessie. I would just sort of say, like, this nurse did this, and this resident did this, and I can't, and I was just this ball of negativity. And even my daughter felt it, and my wife said it to me. She said, we're in a good mood, and then you come home and I don't know how to tell you this, like, right? Like, yeah. And my response was, well, you know what? I don't get to be this way at work. At work, I have to be collegial.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have to be this. I have to be patient.
Mhm.
And so at home, that's when I get to complain.
It's
That's when I
the pop-off valve.
pop off valve.
Yeah,
That's
for
it.
all that
Yeah.
stress.
And to me, that sounded totally justified. And why aren't you more
Reasonable.
empathetic for my struggle? Like, of course, just thinking about me. Never mind, like you said, that my wife was working full time and then would be at home with the kids. I was working 2 weekends a month. She would be at home with the kids alone 2 weekends a month. We didn't have the nanny on the weekends.
Mm.
So, and so then that was my response. Like, this is about, and that her response was, how is it fair that, your family, the people you supposedly love the most, that they then get this worst version of you?
Yeah. And so many people's families get the worst version of them. Not because we don't value our families, but I think because we reach, I would call it capacity, right?
Mm.
You do all that you can and
That's
you
it.
get home and you're out of capacity. I remember getting home from clinic out of capacity. I
Out
just
of
given
capacity.
more
And
than I had.
unloading,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or just like being a mute.
Checking
Like,
out. Checking out.
checking
That's
out.
what I would do.
Yeah.
Check out on the
Checking
couch.
out. Like, I just don't have bandwidth for anyone and anything, right? Like, I'm
And
just
nobody wants to be that with their family and young kids.
no, that's not when you envision like having your family and having kids. You're like, oh, this is not, it's an exhaust cloud.
So what happened?
So this is where, and call it whatever you want. The universe must have heard me, because she said that to me. And Jesse, I have a history of depression, and she knows that. My wife used to be very worried about saying things like that to me. She was, the reason that affected me so much is, one, like, she was and has been eternally supportive of me and my mental health challenges. And so for her to say that, like, actually, it was really hard for her.
Really powerful. Yeah. And
Really
really
powerful.
important.
So
Yeah.
that's one thing as I've thought back, why did that have such an impact on me? Because she said it. And it wasn't just that she said it, I want to say she said it in a loving way, because she was in that saying that she was also concerned.
And what comes to mind here too is you were also able to hear it. I actually talk a lot about having partners who struggle with their mental health, because that is part of my journey as well. And I think that we often, as the other partner, say things that don't get heard. And so there is this sort of moment where one day you'll say something and it is heard. And probably because she said it in that loving way, I often talk about it's the energy with which you say it, right? If we say it in a frustrated, resentful, angry, bitter way, you probably don't hear it.
That's
so
it.
You mentioned that she said in a loving way and you heard it.
She heard it. I heard it. I felt it. I felt sad. I remember feeling like kind of confused, like, well, what am I supposed to do? Like, that's how I felt. And so in that way, I say the universe must have heard me, because we, the medical group we worked with, they had all these end of the year, like, you had to attend these work sessions, and they had to be off hours, right? They all had to be off hours
required to show up.
Evening and on the weekend. And I was like, well, I don't want to do more weekends, because I already worked 2 weekends. So I was going to some of these evening sessions, and you were leading one of them. And Jesse, at the time, you were the chief of physician health and wellness. And I had never, to be honest, attended any wellness event. I always look, my thoughts of that at the time were, why would I spend more time at work when I don't?
Total disbeliever.
Total disbeliever. Yeah. Like, I'm, work is work. And then they're like, oh, you get 2 hours of time for this, and there's dinner. And so I was like, okay, well, this sounds
And you got a
interesting.
bonus, right? You had to do a certain number of hours.
Yeah, you do certain hours to get a bonus.
Whatever it takes to get people to
But
wellness.
the title was intriguing. The title was Evidence-Based Workplace Happiness. And it was, and my like BS alarm sort of went off. I was like, that's not a choice. That's not something you can choose to do. But I was intrigued enough. And it was like time for our bonus, and there was dinner that
good dinner.
I went
healthy dinner. Yeah, good.
I went ahead and went, and maybe you can share like the intention of that session, because I never asked you this. I mean, I know the intention of it, but like how did you?
Well, at that time, I had been doing many talks on gratitude, and the actual intention of it was really to get people to dip a toe into wellness. And I think during the talk, I actually brought up a lot of different things that you could do, because we knew that people, this is a little backwards, but we knew that people had to come. And so it's a place, and I often talk about this, where you can get wellness doubters to find something that appeals to them. And so the design of the talk was actually exactly what happened with you, just so you know, was really to get people to find something that piqued their interest to try, and to talk about the evidence, because physicians are convinced by evidence. And so this was the time where people were really starting to do a fair number of, the Greater Good Science Center at Berkeley was releasing a lot of stuff about happiness, and the Yale happiness course that a lot of people take had begun and was one of the most popular courses out there. And so there was science around it. And so our intention was actually to sort of give people, I call it a potpourri or smorgasbord of different things,
of different wellness
that might appeal to them. Not with the intention that, the system doesn't need to be fixed, but that we all want to be happy. And why not find a few ways in which you can be happy while we try to fix the system? And as you might remember, I also had a number of leadership roles. So I think I had credibility in the department, right? So I was site chief of Mission Bay. And when you have that credibility as an operational leader also, and so I was like, we're working on this, but in the meantime, you can also do some things to help you. So that was really our intention, was to take advantage of this opportunity where people who would never go to a wellness thing it was one of the, 4 choices. So we had an opportunity and a chance for people to experience wellness who hadn't experienced it in the past.
That's right. That's exactly what happened to me. And the thing you did, which you probably recall, is you had us, like, at one point pull out our phones, and you said, okay, the only time in the whole session you're going to use your devices, and send a text message or an email to somebody you work with that you're grateful for. And very importantly, you said, and why. And so I worked with one of my colleagues, if you remember him, Ray Cordero.
Oh, yeah.
Shared a little office space together. And when I started, I was like 4 years in. When I started, he was my go-to for clinical advice. He's also a father of 3 kids. And like I said, my wife was pregnant with our 3rd. And so he had become this sort of mentor / like father figure for me. And so I just texted him. I said, it's really great to share an office with you and like to be friends with you. And I appreciate all your support or something. And then you asked us, now, how do you feel? And that was a light bulb moment for me, because I was like, oh man, like I feel better. Whoa, like my mind was blown. Honestly, my mind was blown. And I became so much more receptive to then all these other things you talked about. And one of the things that you talked about was, and I believe you showed the TED Talk, it was like a 10-minute TED Talk of Andy Puddicombe from Headspace, where he talks about like, we spend, how much time do we spend like doing our hair? How much time do we spend picking out our outfit for the day? And how much time have you spent taking care of your mind? And I was like,
a great TED Talk for any of our listeners who haven't listened to it. It's the founder of Headspace. And
that's right.
I think for many of us in medicine, we didn't ever spend any time taking care of our mind. And yet it's our most valuable asset as physicians, for sure. I mean, our physical health too, but
that's right.
Without our minds, we're
No,
Done.
and even if we think about physical fitness, I think exercise has so many mental like benefits, but that's not why a lot of people, they don't focus on that. And then there are all these other mental exercises you can do. And so mindfulness meditation is that. Like I learned about it there, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna download Headspace. Like,
Okay.
what do
Yep.
I do? Because my family thought I was an asshole, and
Mhm.
and I had just had this experience where, like, honestly, I left that session feeling better than when I walked in. And I was like, wow,
Mhm.
I wasn't expecting that. And like, what is in my control? Like, like, and so maybe happiness is a choice. It's
Mhm.
not the choice to be happy, but it's the choice of how you go through your life, how you go through the day.
I love what you just said there because it's something I actually bring up in coaching a lot, is just the question of maybe, right? So you didn't decide happiness is a choice. I totally believe it. You just brought in this, like, maybe it's a choice. And all of a sudden your mind opens up and you're willing to try something. And so I think sometimes we think we have to go all in. We have to believe it. We have to, be convinced by the evidence. And instead your mind was like, just maybe I'll try this and see what happens.
And I'll be honest, that's what I remember from that talk. I don't remember any of the
That's all right.
scientific evidence.
I don't
even
actually
though
remember all the details either.
Even though, no, but you said it. You said doctors want. I was probably that night, like being like, huh, okay, this has more credibility because you presented some studies. But now looking back, that is not what stayed with me. So I find that's very interesting. Is like we tell ourselves that one thing matters, but then what actually had the impact, right? That's where our emotions sort of come into play.
Yeah.
Like I think
So
that's
what
where.
did you decided that maybe your happiness was in your control and you had this new tool of Headspace.
Oh yeah, so I started using it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I didn't know when to, so initially I started using it at night before I went to sleep, and I was wearing headphones, which were uncomfortable to sleep in. But I was next to my wife, and she was like, "You can't play this meditation." She didn't meditate, and so
Okay.
then I was like, "Okay," So I put headphones on, and every night I would fall asleep, and I don't. That's not the sort of intention of it. And to even talk about that, Andy will talk about that. I was doing the 30-day starter course, like
Okay. Yeah.
every day I would just, and so I
I always tell
restarted.
people, put your earbuds in and just push the button and do what they tell you.
That's it.
And just like keep an open mind and see what
That's
happens.
it. That's it. And that's what I decided I was going to do. I'm going to do this for 30 days.
Okay.
But very, very quickly in a day or two. And on my mornings were always like a cluster. Like I would get up late. I would, I hadn't optimized any routines at this point. I was, just to give your listeners a sense, right? I would honestly on the way home, like pick up fast food because I was so stressed out, and I would use that food to comfort my health was in not good shape at all. And at years I'd been using food. And so this came at a time where sort of my mental health was struggling, my physical health was struggling. So I would just sit. So I decided, where can I do this where I'm not going to get interrupted, where I'm not rushed for time? And it was sort of in problem solving in my head that I was like, oh, we live next to a city college, and there's a big parking lot that's empty at the end of the day. And so I would just drive into that lot, just like a couple minutes from our house, and face the tree. We live in like beautiful part with lots of trails and trees. And so I would just face the trees and hit play and sit in my car. And, at least making the scenery picturesque made that a little more bearable. But I would tell you that there were many times, especially in that first month, like especially the first few weeks, where I was so uncomfortable sitting there. You check in with your body, and I'd be like, my whole body is tense. I have tension here. I have like, how is this fun for me to just like focus on this? It's not. Or my brain was like, want to look at my phone. I don't want to do this. I want to do like.
Okay. So what happened after, I don't know, was it 21 or 30 days?
I think it was 30 days, but I think after like 21 days or some
That's sort of
point
the magic
there,
number, right?
I just started when I would come into the house, I would just say, okay, I'm going to just like focus on this, like my kids and my wife, ask my wife how her day was, play with my kids, and really enjoy it, not like worry about what happened during the day, because and there was that, I like how you talk about transitions like that. It was that, and it was unintentional. It was just happened that I thought this is a place where I can have quiet time and I'm not rushed.
And I'll just add in for a lot of our listeners, you've heard me talk about mindfulness in the transitions. And so I often talk about between home and work in the morning, like, because it changes your energy when you walk in, and it can actually change your whole experience of your day. Same thing between home and work. And for some of us, especially if you have little kids, you often have to stop at the park a few blocks away. But you know, if you live in Chicago, you can do it in the garage, just turn the car off so you don't have any exhaustion, right? But I think it is key that you do it in that transition, because it allowed you to be present at home with your kids when you got there.
Yeah, that's right. You know, I don't think I actually have appreciated that, how
You picked the magic time.
impactful that time was to do it. But it really did let me sort of release the tension from the day and then be.
And what did your wife say? Because that's my favorite part.
Yeah, because my wife noticed a few weeks in, she said, there's something different about you. You know, it's that my energy was changing, had changed. And she very quickly picked up on it, right? It wasn't, and then I said, I'm meditating in the car. And she honestly didn't believe me.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
That's not something we had talked about. Meditation. I mean, again, this was 2015. So
it was early on.
It wasn't as like
a thing.
It wasn't as much of a thing. I mean, still, like Headspace, I think, was the only app.
Yeah.
Now there's so many, right? And it's like everywhere. And so she didn't even, this didn't resonate with her. And I showed her the app and that little check marks next to the days I had been doing. And then she said, okay, you know, just like keep
doing it, right? That's
doing it. Yeah, keep
like,
doing it.
That is, you should keep
whatever
doing
you're doing. And one day I came home and I could see my daughter and my son, my daughter especially, she was like kind of shaking. And I was like, what is going on? And then like my wife was like, my daughter's crying. My wife was like kind of crying. And I guess she had just been yelling at them about something. And then I had been telling her, like, this was like after I had been doing it for several months. So I kept doing it. After I finished that 30 days, I was like, I'm just gonna keep doing this. And so I would and there are different packs. So like
you can
very
go on
quickly,
forever.
I was like, anxiety pack. Yes, I need this one. And
right.
And then I'd tell her, I'd be, you got to try this. This is really good. Like, I think it's really helping me. It's helping me at work. At work, I was starting to look at work differently. This is how I got involved. And then I reached out to you, or I came to some event and I was like,
I think you reached out directly and said,
I think I reached out directly to tell you this. Like, wow, this is really changed, like had a big impact on me. And then I was telling my wife this, and that night she went up and she downloaded the app and she started using it, and then she started using it. And so I always think about how like that talk,
the ripple effect, right?
Has this ripple effect. You know, I gave a talk last year on the power of kindness, and I reflected on that act of kindness. I thought it really was an act of kindness when you know,
that's beautiful.
Spent an evening with your colleagues sharing these practices that you thought one thing might resonate with them. And then
that was my hope. One thing would resonate with each person and they would do one thing, and that might change one thing that would lead to this ripple effect. But I actually didn't ever expect the transition that you had after that, and like how it's completely changed your life.
And the rest, I can kind of summarize. Like I was making a lot of choices that weren't in line. Then you sort of, when you meditate, you start to create a space where I'd like to say you start to, it's not always feel good. In fact, often it's not. Like you start to reckon with, you view your thoughts. You're supposed to, sort of detach yourself. But initially that's the process. Like you're you're viewing them, you're noticing like emotions that are coming up for you. And then I like to say it creates a space where, I started recognizing that there were a lot of things I was doing that weren't, I was a father now of 3 kids, and I was going to the hospital and taking care of people that the end result of the way I was eating and living.
Yeah.
And that's when I sort of said, okay, choices.
I
And
think it helps you see how you're acting in ways that are out of alignment. And it helps you
yeah,
see that,
yeah,
as you said, you have the power and the control to change it. I think when we're reacting, we're just like, no, this is happening to me. And I don't really have any power over what I'm eating and what I'm doing and how I'm feeling. And mindfulness gets you to slow down enough that you're like, oh, wait a minute. This is also out of alignment. That's what I found is I start to like, it feels, actually, you mentioned that discomfort. That's what you notice is like, wow, this feels really uncomfortable because it's out of alignment for you. It's pretty cool. And so what happens with your fast food addiction?
So fast food addiction.
I say that with love, by the way.
No, yeah. Fast food addiction became, I switched fast food to meditation, basically. I stopped picking it up because, it didn't happen right away. And there was just like a series of things where like somebody else came to our hospital, who I'm talking about, and told his story about how he had needed cardiac stents when he was 40. And then 6 months later needed bypass surgery because nobody talked to him about how to eat.
Yep.
And then he discovered plant-based diet. This is Rajiv Mesquita. He's a doctor in South Sacramento.
And he actually has a cookbook out there, which I will put in the show notes because he and his wife wrote this cookbook. And I think it's cool. If doctors make cookbooks, we should all check them out. So I will put the
yes. He has a whole food plant-based cookbook.
Show notes. Yeah.
And after his bypass surgery, he became a yoga instructor. He, certified trainer.
Plant-based diet, right?
And he's completely whole food plant-based. And then started like going around the region, Northern California, all the hospitals in our system, telling his story. And I was sitting in the crowd, and I tell you, I wouldn't have walked into that talk. I wouldn't have been receptive to that talk if I wasn't already in a space where I was doing this regular practice. I know that.
And so what happened after that talk?
Well, I signed up to eat this way for 3 weeks. And then I very quickly, within a couple of days, was like, I can't do this. I didn't give up, but I spent a year then like learning how to make good, tasty plant-based food, trying different things, finding different restaurants, whatever. And then when the challenge came up the following year, I did it. And in 3 weeks, it just transformed how I felt. My blood pressure normalized. It was high blood pressure. I went and got my labs checked before this, and I had prediabetes. I had high cholesterol, and I had all the things that were going to lead.
As I remember, it was part of a physician wellness initiative where we decided to do this. And we offered the doctors labs before and labs after. And all of our meetings had plant-based meals for 3 weeks. And we brought in speakers to talk about it and people to teach you how to cook. It was really fun.
Yes. It was plant-powered challenge.
Plant-powered.
Plant-powered challenge.
During Earth Month, just to be.
During Earth Month. Yeah. And so I was convinced after that. I mean, not completely convinced. Like I still had a lot of, I would say, food addictions and tradition. The relationship with food is one thing I've realized is just super complicated. And so many of those things are at play: addiction and emotions and tradition. And it's not something you can just wave your fingers and say, okay, I've changed it. But I did make significant changes because of how good I was feeling and because I had found ways to eat it that I enjoyed.
And I just want to point out for people, it took you a year. It wasn't like
it took me a year to even build up the courage.
Every person, it takes a long time to shift in those ways and to find things that work for you.
Yeah, it starts with just saying to yourself, this is something I want to do. This is important to me. I don't know how I'm going to get there or how quickly. That doesn't matter. What matters is it's something I want to do, and I want to do it in a way that feels good for me. And so then after about a year of eating that way, mostly, my whole body had like I lost 50 pounds, of weight, not by depriving myself, but just by eating more plants.
Yeah.
And I said, this is almost unbelievable. Like, this is too good to be true. And then I asked the question, my prediabetes reversed, my high cholesterol reversed. And I said, why aren't we doing this for patients? Like, it was just a legitimate question that would keep coming up in my head. Like,
when you
I
take
was
care
seeing
of all the post-heart attack people.
yeah, I was seeing taking care of all these downstream events. And I was like, why aren't we doing this upstream? Like, we could prevent so much of this. Because I was talking then, I started sitting and talking. I mean, the one thing I loved was how much time I had in the afternoon to go back and see patients.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a beautiful part about hospital medicine.
About hospital medicine is that even though you're forming these quick relationships, you can form very you can have very poignant and meaningful conversations over the course of days. And
so when did you go do I know you did your lifestyle medicine board.
Yeah, so in 2018 I got certified. I reached out to Rajiv, and he sort of became a mentor of mine, and said, he was running programs now at his medical center. He said, let's bring one here. And he said, okay, yeah, it's a good idea. And so we made a plan to do that. We eventually did that. He told me, get certified. I said, there's a certification? He said, that was new in 2017. And I got it in 2018 through the American the American Board of Lifestyle Medicine. Yeah. And then COVID came, and I was a hospitalist, and I sort of put my thoughts of leaving that, because I had these thoughts like at that time, like, this is what I need to do with my life. But so the first couple of years of the pandemic, I stuck around in the hospital, but it never really went away. In fact, the pandemic showed us that diseases that were related largely to lifestyle were leading to more severe cases and more mortality from COVID. And so I was like, there's even more of an imperative to do this. And so there was a brief stint where I shifted to primary care and realized very quickly, this is not how I want to practice.
Yes.
This is a system that was designed for a different type of practice, not the practice I want to do. And so I had the lovely opportunity to join a startup where I practiced lifestyle medicine telehealth.
Yeah. And
I've been there for 9 months. And that is coming to an end. Unfortunately, that company has lost its funding, but I'm so grateful for this opportunity because it allowed me to sort of take that leap. It allowed me to really, I have written on my mirror, Jesse, is different motivational phrases and affirmations and things. And one of them says, pick yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I was waiting for somebody to pick me. Pick me. I'm doing this great work. Like, pick me. And at some point I was like, no one's going to pick you. Like, that's not the point of this life.
I see that so often. So I work with a lot of people that are transitioning or want to transition. And there's two things that you said that I didn't even know about. So I just think it's fascinating. Like, we often have to take a step and then another step to figure out where our next path is. And so many physicians are like, no, I have to pick the right choice, and that has to be the next one for going forward. And it's never that way. So yours is at least 2 steps to get to where you're going to be next. And that each of those steps give you tremendous information. And so it's never a mistake. It's just, you have to actually move through these things. And I'm thinking about my own transition. I did the same thing. I moved from one location to another. I did hospital work. I did clinic work. I tried leader, like, all of those things were necessary to become who I was, to help me figure out where my passion lay. And I'm constantly changing still, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of beautiful that you had this step by step by step. And then the other thing you said is to pick yourself. So many people are waiting for the right thing to come, or like, I have to find the right thing. And I would say when you pick yourself, you begin to create the right thing.
That's right. That's how I feel now. So, obviously I was very sad when I found out the job I love and the company I love is closing next month. But I also very quickly realized, like, no, I'm going to figure out, I don't know how,
Mhm.
I'm going to figure out a way to do this work. I love this work. I was meant to do this work.
I will
And
tell you in coaching, I just want to gift you this. You won't know the how until you've done it. So as doctors, we want to know the how first. But as sort of entrepreneur, startup innovators, which is what you're going to become, right?
yeah.
You know the how at the end. And so if you can give up the idea of having to know
Yeah.
how,
No, I'm realizing this.
I can see that on your face. You're like, oh yeah, I don't need to know how. I just
I don't need to know
one
how.
step, the next step, and the next
It's just
step.
the next step and the next step. And is this the next best step? And maybe it's not, but I'm going to learn from it.
Mhm.
And then I'm going to take the next step.
Well,
Right.
and that when we think about your transition to the plant-based diet, I just want to point out you've already done this. Like that's transition is probably much harder than this
Yeah.
transition. And you didn't know the how. You said that, right?
That's
I
right.
just learned a little bit and I figured this out. And here you are, you know, completely different health, completely different physical state and mental state too, is my
Mental
sense from
state
you, right?
too.
It's all
Different
related.
like way of being, I like to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. So this story to me is just such a heartening story for other people to hear, and so hopeful, because I think so many people think it's so hard. And it's not that it was easy, but it's literally one step and then the next step.
That's right.
And in your case, it led to, you know, complete health transformation, mental health transformation, and career transformation. That's ongoing.
And, you know, I love, you know, Dan Harris and 10% Happier.
Yeah.
And I love the sentiment. I read that book and it was like, it won't like, and I totally agree with it. Like, it won't be this like early on, especially when I would come home, like, it wasn't this like dramatic change. Like, I was just a little bit more present. I was probably still intermittently complaining sometimes. And, you know, but it was that little shift that led to shifts in other things. It led to a shift in my relationships at home, how I was parenting then. Then it led to a shift in my wife. Then it led to a shift in our relationship. It led to a shift in my relationships at work.
Yeah.
I felt so grateful that that's why I reached out to you. And then I ended up that became a big part of my work experience, was working on wellness with you.
Yeah.
And going to, you know, and leading workshops together and leading conferences together. And it was just sort of like so unexpected. Like, it's just what you said just now. Like, if I had thought about how things were going to play, I never would have guessed or predicted how things unfolded. So now I have to tell myself that all the time.
Yeah. And as you move ahead, you couldn't predict this. And
I can't predict what's going to happen.
Yeah. So tell us about your podcast that you're doing now, because I'd really like to hear about that.
Thank you. Yeah. So I was connected to my co-host, who's become a very good friend of mine. His name is Tapotu, actually, Tapotu Paletti. He goes by Po for short. He's from originally family's from American Samoa. And he went, he's somebody who lives in Northern California as well, so not too far from me, a former co-resident of mine. Actually took care of him in Abu Dhabi. He was in Abu Dhabi because he had applied to be on a reality TV show for unhealthy Americans. And he didn't know what he was getting into, but he got there and they said, this is a lifestyle medicine immersion. And they put him on a whole food plant-based diet. And he did meditation every day. And in 3 weeks, just like he experienced so many benefits. His blood pressure normalized. His pains in his joints went away. He had swelling in his like hands and feet and went away. I think he lost like 30. He's a pretty big guy, but he lost like 30 pounds or something, you know. And then he came back, and Po has 4 children of various ages, from like teenage down to 4-year-old. And I think that daughter was 2 at the time. And he works as an officer in the Department of Corrections full time. His wife works full time. And it's sort of like, how do I do this? And he was reaching out to that doctor at Cleveland Clinic, Abu Dhabi. And she reached out to me. And she was like, I have this great guy, and he needs somebody locally who can kind of like help him. and he's a member of the health group that you and I used to both work at. So that was why I came to mind. And she saw I was doing lifestyle medicine. And so I didn't formally take care of him like as his doctor, but I started calling. I mean, we started talking on the phone. We would talk on the phone like weekly, which is how I know. I mean, I had this experience with other people too, where I would just start coaching them in my free time. That's how you know that's what you're meant to do in your life. Yeah.
So how did you guys decide to start?
Oh, so then one day Poe said to me on the phone, he said, Rock, or Dr. Rock, or Rock. He calls me Rock. You know, he doesn't call me doctor because we're friends. And he said, Rock, I think because what we were talking about? We were talking about his struggles. We were talking about we would talk about mindfulness. I'm a big believer. And I was like, Poe, you got to, that's something that's foundational, that awareness that it brings. And so we talk about that. We talk about eating when your family doesn't eat this way. He was working really hard to maintain a whole food, plant-based diet. He would pack his lunches and go to work, but he was getting burnt out from it because his kids were bringing all this other food, wife and kids were bringing all this other food in the home. So just those struggles, one day he said, I think so many people have these struggles.
And so
as he said it, I could feel,
It's called, what is it called? The Health Feast? Is that right?
The Health Feast. Yeah. The Health Feast. And that was the Wi-Fi password at my gym. That's where the name actually comes from.
Love it.
But when I heard it, I said, yeah, that's what good health should be. It should be. I registered that name like a year before I met Poe. I was waiting, when he said it in the conversation, I was like, yeah, we should record these conversations. Like literally, but then now it's become, we have guests on, and we're pretty early. I mean, we started in, just at the beginning of the year, but it's been awesome to just, my intention was always and still continues to be that I want to support Poe in living and being the healthiest version of himself. And his intention was to bring this message and to help me spread this message to more people. And in doing so, to inspire other people.
That's beautiful.
Take control of their health.
Yeah, that ripple effect.
That ripple effect. Exactly.
So if people want to find you, connect.
Yeah, they can find my podcast at thehealthfeast.com. So ThehealthThealth feast, FEAST.com. Or you can find us at The Health Feast on Instagram and at YouTube at The Health Feast. And then me personally, I'm at Rock Your Life. Rock is spelled R-A-K, by the way. It's short for my first name, Rakesh, but pronounced R-O-C-K. So you can find me at Rock Your Life, RAKYOURLIFE, on Instagram, and you can find me on LinkedIn. And you can visit my personal website, which needs some updating, but maybe by the time you publish this, it'll have that, is rockyourlife.org.
Oh, love it. Beautiful. I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your journey. What a full circle moment for me. And to go back to that time, gosh, it's almost 10 years ago now. And to see what's transpired in the last years is pretty incredible. And to see the impact that I think we can make even with 1 2-hour talk and like what it leads to in the end. And, 8 years of friendship as well. Right.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's right.
So I want to thank everyone for listening. And Dr. Rock will share a mindful moment with us after the singing bowl.
As always, if you want to declutter your mind, be more present, and start truly living your one wild and precious life, come find us at the mindfulhealerspodcast.com.
Work with one of us.
Work with both of us.
Start or uplevel your mindfulness practice.
Discover how mindful coaching can change your life.
Or even better, do both as part of our Mindful Healers programs and retreats. You can find links to find out more about our programs and join our communities at themindfulhealerspodcast.com.
Reach out and get started on your journey to a life better lived today.
The content of this podcast is not meant to be medical or life advice. If you choose to participate in our mindful moments, please do so safely.
So today I'm going to lead us through what is called the RAIN meditation. And RAIN is an acronym. It's a mindfulness tool that was developed by Tara Brach, who's a psychologist and a teacher of mindfulness meditation. And it stands for recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. I love this meditation because it's really effective at helping you deal with strong or intense emotions, particularly negative emotions that feel difficult. It's also really helpful, and one of the things I use it to help my patients is it's helpful to deal with cravings. So you're going to start by just getting into a comfortable, relaxed state, your back straight, and sort of relax your shoulders. I like to put one hand on my belly so I can feel my belly blowing up like a balloon. And you can close your eyes or you can keep them open and have a soft gaze on something in the room. We take a few deep breaths into the belly. Breath in through the nose. So we're going to start with recognize. And recognize is to bring your attention inward. It's to recognize what's happening right now. And you might ask yourself, are there any strong thoughts or feelings that are coming up for me? You might be able to identify a specific emotion, like feeling worried or upset. And whatever it is, just simply recognize it without judgment. We're just going to take a few deep breaths. A is allow. And in allowing, we let the experience be there just as it is. And this can be tough. I know, especially if what you're feeling is unpleasant. Try to resist the urge to change anything. Just let it be. You're giving yourself permission to feel exactly as you do. We'll take a couple deep breaths. I is investigate. Now we're going to bring a gentle curiosity to the experience of what we're feeling in our body. And you can kind of do a very quick body scan where you sort of check in with starting the top of your head all the way through your body to the bottom of your toes. And just noticing, is there something you're feeling? Is there any tension? And we're not trying to judge it or change it. We're just noticing, just noticing. Maybe that emotion that's come up for us is connected to that tension. Try and feel if the thoughts or feeling of that emotion have any impact on that tension that you're feeling. Take a couple deep breaths. N is nurture. Nurture is where we offer ourselves some compassion. So if there was any tension or discomfort, imagine on the in-breath taking in a warm light or a soothing touch. So you're breathing into those areas of tension. Just like to say to myself, maybe put my hand on my heart and say, remind myself, I'm okay. I'm loved. I am enough. Just take a few breaths here. Just take a few moments to notice how you feel now. Or start to bring your attention to the sensations in your body. And wiggle your fingers and your toes. And bring your awareness back to the room that you're in. And when you're ready, on your own time, you can gently open your eyes. And remember, you can bring this RAIN practice into your daily life at any moment when you need it. Thank you.